For those of you that are new to the collaborative cafes or HR collaborative in general, just a little bit about us. We're a community of fractional HR experts, and we help small to mid-sized organizations make work better by providing HR talent and solutions when and where they need it. So we're your phone a friend, and we provide those solutions for you. So we're happy to provide this month's collaborative cafe to discuss strategies for identifying the right people for the right seats to fuel employee engagement in this new year. So for our agenda today, we're going to start by introducing you to our hosts today, and we'll let them dive into the discussion. We'll have our first breakout session. We'll break out into small groups, do some introductions and talk about the challenges we're facing. We'll take some time then to report out what we heard in that first breakout session before diving into some recommendations and discussion on how we can solve some of those challenges. We'll then take some time to report out and of course, save some time for Q&A at the end of our presentation today. So let's meet our hosts. Nancy Johnson. She's a passionate human resources leader with more than 20 years of experience creating positive employee journeys. As HR Collaborative's Chief People Operations Officer, she makes work better for our firm's community of HR experts so they can do the same for all of our clients. Julie Bermania, with more than 20 years of HR experience herself, she has worked within the diverse industry settings, including healthcare, corporate, nonprofit, professional service, and manufacturing. Here, she's an HR business partner, and she partners with clients to provide a broad array of HR guidance and services. She understands the value of an engaged workforce and strives to help her clients build an environment in which their teams can do their best work. So without further ado, I'll toss it over to our host for today's cafe.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I know Julie and I are very excited to be here this morning with all of you, talking about yet another buzzword, loud quitting. So, right? Before we get into all of that today, we thought we would start off with a little bit of a vocabulary review. So we know we've had a lot of terminology thrown at us over the last few years, and it all started with the Great Resignation. How can we forget? We lived through it and suffered through it as well as leaders who have been dealing with the churn. But, you know, just as a reminder, in 2021, there were 47 million Americans that left their positions, and it really didn't slow down last year. Last year, it's reported 50 million people left their positions. So that's really been leaving employers with a lot of churn, a lot of instability in terms of their workforce. And it's, of course, we know that when you start a new job, so if you're one of the people who have left to start a new job, that's one of the most stressful events that someone can go through as well. So there's a lot of stress involved with that type of churn, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Change management at every turn.
At every turn. And it doesn't surprise me anyway that there's been some regret to follow. And our next term is resignation regret. So of all those people who made the change during the Great Resignation, Paychex had put out a study recently where they had collected data from across 350 or so organizations. And what they showed us through their study is that 8 out of 10 people who left actually had regret in doing so. So for those of you who are still struggling to maybe fill some positions at your workplaces, maybe a recruitment strategy is to call up some of those people that you wish never left in the first place, huh?
See what they're up to. Yeah. Yeah, we've benefited from that, you know, just phone a friend and little do you know, they're interested in re-engaging. So give it a try.
Yeah, the grass isn't always greener, right? And then, of course, we all heard the term quiet quitting. I was reading an article recently with NPR, and they're talking about quiet quitting being one of the most overused phrases of the last year. And I think we're all tired of hearing about it, talking about it, but really we're getting very tired of living through it. And what quiet, yeah, I mean, and what quiet quitting means, if you're not familiar with it, it's sort of this trend of employees who are in their jobs, they haven't left, but they're just not giving their 110% like they used to. They're burned out, they're less engaged, and they're coasting along. So another term you might be hearing is carefully coasting in their positions.
Nancy's gonna coin that one. We'll be giving her credit fully by the end of 2023.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's hope we don't still have to talk about that.
No, but to your point, they're not engaging. They're exercising their control to find their own work-life balance where it maybe hasn't been, provided in the scope of their current engagement. So we'll get into that a bit more in the slides to come.
Okay, looking forward to that. And then those people who are feeling a little disengaged and they might be at their tipping point, well, watch out, they could be rage applying. So yet a new term for us. This is really going viral on some of the social media outlets like TikTok, for example, where employees oftentimes, the younger generations, Gen Z, are getting frustrated, fed up. Manager kind of rubs them the wrong way that day, and to get revenge, they go and rage apply. Because we've made it easy
We
to,
have made it very easy. You just have your profile out there. There could be 20 positions you apply to in any given day. And that might come back to haunt those who are taking that approach. It does send a message about your professionalism and things, but I don't know that that's really stopping, certain people right now. It's just, it's a way to exercise that control again.
yeah. And with it taking off on social media, it's really encouraging their counterparts to do the same thing,
Right.
You get frustrated at work, don't worry, you can find something different. So, but I would just caution, because remember the resignation regret statistic, you might regret it later.
And that all leads to the loud quitting term. Really, we've just started to lay the groundwork of what drives loud quitting. We're going to go through a few scenarios of how it plays out in the work environment, but the reality is loud quitting is essentially, it's a great job market. I'm not real happy with what's happening in my current environment. And I want to talk to my leader about what I need to stay here. Maybe I've already got an offer that I'm going to go to them with and say, hey, this is the offer I'm getting, or I'm going to talk to everybody in my department about how ripe the job market is for people in our area, in our specialty. And it's a trickle effect. It's almost like I think of Minesweeper, the game, the video game Minesweeper, where one person kind of blows up and it has the impact to the rest of the department. So it's whether they want more pay, they want different circumstances around their role, different requirements of their job. That's how we're seeing that present itself. And it's across generations. It's not any one particular generation. So we're excited to review this in more detail with each of you and how you're experiencing it in your space.
Wow. So loud quitting, and here we are. How did we get here? I think, yeah. So there's a lot of factors that kind of built up to kind of put us in this scenario.
Absolutely. And it starts with engagement level. We've talked about engagement for decades now. The importance of engagement really improves work productivity and improves so much about the work experience. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, since 2020 is overall engagement is dropping. As of 2022, we globally only saw 22% of people actively engaged through the Gallup studies.
Wow.
So it's a trend that was initially increasing prior to 2020. We saw levels of engagement increasing. Unfortunately, it's taking a different turn. And there are many reasons for that. We'll cover those here. But the reality is it's very costly. Globally, the cost of engagement is in 2022 was topping nearly $8 trillion. Trillion. And I know that's globally, but here in the US, we're also seeing levels of engagement drop. It was I think 32% for the Gallup study was the 2022 level of actively engaged employees based on their studies. So it's not where we want it to be. And when we're spending a good portion of our time, whether it's as an HR professional, as a leader in an organization, as a peer, discussing what's not good, what's not going right. That's taking away from what we really want to be doing and focusing on our growth and stability of the organization.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that really dovetails into, this next statistic. So this 50%, so 50% of employees have sort of a new attitude and outlook on what they expect from their employer. And this statistic came from a study that Gardner put out, and it really sort of highlights that people have these shifting attitudes about work, what's important in their life, where work fits into their life. So people are really, really taking a hard look at this. And that is factors into the next statistic. 61% of employees, according to that recent Gallup study, have indicated that the work-life balance is very important factor for them at work. And, that's that sort of Likert scale from not very important to very important. And the 61% is an uptick of about 8 percentage points in not even a 10-year time frame. So you can really see that this is gaining importance. It's really changing the landscape at work, and it all is starting to fit together. And then employee well-being, right, is another thing.
Right. The Surgeon General reported another study of at least 76%, you see on the screen there, 76% of employees have reported at least one mental health occurrence in the work environment, or a mental health condition in the work environment over the past year. So that's huge. 76%. Majority of your staff are dealing with something.
Mhm.
So how are leaders helping to connect with each individual and understand what their needs are, understand what their struggles are, and meeting them where they are to provide meaningful solutions? We talked about different benefit programs that employers are considering to really help help walk alongside employees in what is most important to them. And it's said this before, thin slicing, right? You can't just apply that benefit plan to everybody. It's not going to be of value to everybody. So thinking about how that could play out. But in addition to that, helping employees be clear on what they're empowered to do in their role, really clear about expectations, and really encouraging employees to invest in and engage in a meaningful way, when they're clear on their accountabilities. I know we're wrapping up on time here, so.
Well, and it's no surprise with these statistics that we find ourselves in the situation of loud quitting. Real quick, before we head into our breakout groups, can you give an example of how you're seeing loud quitting play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we'll talk about this more in the breakouts, but what I'm seeing is not necessarily just a certain generation of employees or a certain professional level of employees. It's really across the board, and the expectations are different. The demands might be a little different, but it's usually highly productive, highly effective individuals that just aren't getting the support that they need, whether it's process, whether it's alignment of our priorities, or just recognition of what work is being achieved, and wanting that clarity and transparency and empowerment from the employer. So they're coming forward and saying, hey, if I can't do my job effectively to the best of my ability, this is not the right place for me. And I'm going to be looking elsewhere. And that's a cry for help. It's a cry for recognition that this is not working. And I hope that many of our employers, our leaders, start to listen and realize the impact of that.
So some of the themes that we heard across all the groups, like companies are fighting over the same employees. So they're getting into what's being referred to as salary wars. It's whoever can throw the highest dollar at that candidate is going to win. Competition for talent has gone global due to the ability to work remotely. So you can literally work from anywhere and work for an organization that's not, within driving distance. Some of you expressed difficulty finding professionals for entry-level positions. So those professionals are either have an expectation that they're going to be offered higher level, or they've already been offered higher level positions. And so finding Quality candidates for, entry-level positions has become difficult. Offers being accepted and then no-shows are declining last minute. I mean, that's another term that we've heard too, is that ghosting. People are rage applying, they go through the process and then they find something else, or they just decide, they change their mind. Some employers are unwilling or unable to break out of past practices regarding flexibility, expectations. They're kind of stuck in their ways, and they're not willing to be flexible and change their approach. Employers don't really have a pulse on employees, so they don't really know where employees' minds are at. They don't know where their desires are, what their expectations are. And so there's a misalignment there. Remote working may result in less engaged employees. So not being able to be together and collaborate and in person with one another can have a impact on engagement. Employers wanting more in-office presence for employees to build those culture, their culture and those relationships, but they don't know how or don't go about it correctly. So demanding that they come into the office 5 days a week, or you're fired. There's other ways to communicate. It's really about how that message is communicated and having a strategy behind that, being intentional. And then there's always that fear that we're going to train employees up, we're going to skill them up, and then they're just going to take all that, what we just invested in them elsewhere. So yeah, lots of themes. We've heard that, we've seen that in organizations. And so I'd like to pass it back over to Julie and Nancy to talk about, what are some ways that we can, start, evaluating the issues that we're facing and, have a change. So as a reminder, breakout groups are not being recorded, but the rest of our discussion and conversations from our hosts today will be. So Julie, Nancy, over to you.
Just one quick point of clarification, and our note takers were asking to make sure that we captured everything here. Is there anything from the group that
yes, thank you,
felt was, maybe an important point from your breakout session that's not represented here? So you want to be sure that that's shared across all.
We had one thing, we're no longer competing within industry, but across the board, employees are being drawn outside of their industries just because those salary competitions just aren't being met within their industry. So just want to point that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to add.
I think one of the dynamics that came up in our breakout session was around the gap because there's been so much changeover with the Great Resignation. Now we have employees that are in that early career stage, 1 to 5 years experience or 20 years experience. And so the newer ones are susceptible to leaving because they haven't seen organizational changes, they haven't seen downturns, structural changes. The more experienced folks have been through some of that. So kind of onboarding, reorienting everyone to the expectations in the organization and the dynamics that are happening internally has prompted some challenges and been an interesting newer dynamic these last couple of years.
Yeah,
I kind of like that concept of re-onboarding, reorienting everybody on the same playing field. It's a good time to make that kind of recommitment to the organization. I wonder if that might be a tactic that we could explore a little bit more with some of the change management that companies are considering. So good, thank you.
Kind of like a reset almost, remember, here we are, and this is what we're set out to do. Your mission, your vision, because it is important. Like some of our previous slides, employees are really looking at what's important in their life. And if they have congruency with what the mission of the organization is and their values, that's only going to help you retain. So it's a good point.
And I think it applies to two different efforts. One, you have different people in the workforce. So you've got multi-generations or different people. So it helps there to reset, but it also, we might not do things the same way we did 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So when you have those 5, 10, 15-year-old, hey, things change in the business model. So it's also a great idea to onboard just to level set from the new business goals.
Absolutely. Good point. Well, Julie and I have been talking about some recommendations that we wanted to share with you today. that might help you get ahead of this loud quitting trend that we're seeing. And Julie, the first one is give employees a voice.
Right. So consistent check-ins, you know, many organizations are doing that in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't have to be super complex. We know that a simple 30-minute check-in every week, or even 15 minutes every week, one-on-one with that individual, with the intent being, you know, how are things going? What are your current challenges? What are your current priorities, and how can I help? You know, just taking that time to really connect and give them that voice, give them that opportunity to say what's on their mind, say what's keeping them up at night. And that's a great way to get in front of what could lead to, you know, a potential looking elsewhere. You know, if I know if that, you know, my employee needs some one-on-one support through whatever it might be that they're facing, you know, they're going to feel that commitment, or, you know, exert that transparency with me. Pulse surveys, you know, always a good time to check in, you know, quarterly, semi-annually, to just say, how are people feeling about things? And those questions can change slightly. You know, maybe you want to focus on a certain area one quarter and then dig into well-being in a different quarter. But all that to say, don't ask the questions if you're not going to follow up and commit to, you know, at least getting back to the team. You know, I think we've often, you know, participated in surveys and, you know, or you know, work through them with clients, and we get the great recommendations, and it comes down to, well, we really, you know, we're not really ready to do anything with that. Well, that's okay. We don't necessarily have to make change, but let's acknowledge that it is something that we want to make a focus in whatever time frame that might be. Autonomy in work, and that really comes in with being clear on accountabilities and how what I'm doing and how my goals tie back to the organization's greater goals. And all of this really aligns with that level set that we just talked about, right? If it's not something that an organization has been doing up to this point, taking the time to get clear on what the organization is working toward and sharing that with the team. It can be that simple, just to let them know we're in this together, and we really want to continue working in a particular direction.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from your experiences?
Well, yeah, and I think it's so important because we know that employees want flexibility, and that flexibility is important in not only their work life, but also at work, and providing people that autonomy to do their best work in the best methods and means possible only helps them build that engagement and, you know, wanting to stay there. And it's going to help get that number up, you know, that wavering engagement level up.
Right.
So the other thing I would say is, you know, around the check-ins and pulse surveys, you know, these are really important. And it's important that your check-ins don't just stay with you as a leader or a manager, because if you're not talking organizationally, how do you know what the whole workforce is needing and demanding? So, you know, consider maybe focus groups, or, you know, kind of more of an open forum for employees to be able to bring forth their concerns. And following up is so important. You know, I think that an example that came to my attention recently of loud quitting had to do with an organization I'm familiar with who went through a reduction in force earlier this year. And with some of the employees that were still there, left after the reduction in force, you know, a leader in the sales department having frustrations because of the lack of follow-up. You know, we went through all of this change. We did this big reduction. I don't know how we're going to still accomplish the goals set out. What are the sales goals? Have they changed? How will the incentive program work? And instead of just communicating directly with the senior leadership, he copied in the entire sales organization in his email. I mean, that's very disruptive. That's what we're talking about with loud quitting. And that's why it's so important to have like that follow-up and be accountable as a leader to communicate effectively with your teams so that you can avoid that disruption.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. All right, let's jump to recommendation number 2. I know we're kind of butting up against the next breakout here. So taking the people first approach. You know, we've talked about earlier on the value of that flexibility, really understanding what can we do if we have the right culture of trust. What can we achieve here? Because right now, to the examples that you all shared, there are plenty of organizations who still just don't believe that they're going to get what they need in the productivity with employees if they allow for the remote setting, or there are different circumstances that are limitations, but really challenging ourselves to think, what could we do differently to really allow this additional flexibility? Encouraging well-being, really looking to understand what well-being means to each individual. And I know that's hard to do as a leader, maybe of 10 people plus, taking the time though to understand what well-being is valued. And we've definitely included that in pulse surveys that have given us some really good insights that it's oftentimes just, I just need that time with my leader to share what I'm struggling with, and that's a great start. Personalized growth and learning. Everybody's got different opportunities ahead of them and different desires. And some of that personalized growth is going to be met with discomfort, but it's really like working with your leader and understanding where that growth could take you, even if it does. I know there's always that concern over, I could just, help them learn and grow only to leave here. But what we like to say at HR Collaborative is we're building, we're building our alumni, we're building these relationships to help them grow. And to the point earlier, they may decide, that they want to come back to your organization after you've invested in them. They've had growth opportunity, they've seen the other side, and they realize that the values and purpose of your organization are what they align best to. So don't minimize the investment and the commitment to growth of development just for fear that they may leave. It may happen, but it might be ultimately better in the long run.
Yes, and that's particularly important for the Gen Zs, right? We know that the growth and learning opportunity is critically important there. And then our final recommendation is around equipping your leaders.
Right. It is a little concerning, I know, realistically, day to day, when you're responding to the needs of the employee. It's kind of, I will say from, leaders that I've worked with historically, there's this initial thought of, well, give an inch, they'll take a mile. And that's not really what this is about now. This is really about, having that leadership approach that's not command and control. It's really, the coach approach. We all have maybe whether it was a team coach that we had or a personal coach that we had of some sort over our lifetime where they really stood out to us. Think of a coach that you had, and how can we take that approach and help our leaders take that approach to working with their teams, to really invest and think about how they can, be their best in the work environment. Provide guardrails. And with that, what could happen sometimes is we have those frontline leaders that are connecting and they want to have that buy-in from the rest of their leadership team to say, I do want to do this for my employee, and here's why. This is why this is important. But providing those guardrails to say, that's great. Here are some laws we need to keep in mind when it comes to how we're executing on our policies and things, but give them that autonomy to make some of those right-sized decisions. I've had examples where, modified schedules. I'd really like to allow this person to work 4 10-hour days. Okay, well, what's the impact to the business? How can that be accommodated? What is the trickle effect of that? Always got to think about that. Will everybody want that? And if they did, how do we make that call? So just talking through that, having those leaders be aware and understanding what the impact may be so that they can make those decisions on their own. Reviewing policies. If there are policies right now that are in place that don't make sense, for the leaders to execute on the work that they need to get done, is there any wiggle room? Is there any opportunity to kind of generalize those policies a little bit more so they can have more discretion in how they execute on them?
Yeah, you don't want to be sending mixed messages,
Right.
And telling your leaders to make these decisions that's best for their teams, but yet your policies and past practices are contradictory. So at least talk about it, manage the change effort together. So
yeah, and with the tools for giving and receiving feedback, it's really like a 4-part series. It starts with an entry question. It kind of gets into some specific feedback. And then solution, right? How do you engage that employee in being part of solution when you're providing them with feedback? And coaching, how do you approach coaching with open-ended questions instead of it feeling accusatory or resulting in one-word responses? How do you help those leaders approach each conversation in a more meaningful and engaging way?
So we heard talk of total rewards for employees and recruits. So emphasizing the full package, not just, that initial base pay, but, what's the total package look like? Building strong alumni. So having a positive employee experience, even, up until they exit the organization. So have some, proud alumni that are really going to talk about their wonderful experience in the workplace. Exit interviews, of course, when people leave, it's great to get their feedback, but also conducting stay interviews. So what's keeping them here? Way to have that conversation before they decide to exit. Compensation review. So understanding where you are and compared to the market that you're competing for talent. Having conversations, do employees get their role? Do they want to do what they've been hired to do? And do they have the capacity, both, timing and bandwidth from a skills perspective? Developing a culture of speaking up. So sharing if the employee or the manager themselves are struggling. So having a culture that fosters the comfort to have conversations, even if they are challenging. Having leadership who invite a culture of open communication and sharing. So just like before, we're all people, we all have different experiences. So fostering a culture where people can share that openly and be their true selves. Having quarterly meetings, so more regular opportunities to touch base. They don't have to be formal in nature necessarily, but having those ongoing conversations throughout the year. Ongoing supervisor and leader training. So that was one thing we saw emphasized in nearly every group is not, training for employees is fantastic, but supervisors and leaders need ongoing training as well. Pulse and engagement surveys. I think Julie was talking about that in the recommendation slide. So getting some feedback from employees, it's great to understand where they're at and solicit their feedback. But of course, taking action is really the most important part. Training for employees for their growth versus what the company will get out of it. So aligning the needs and training desires for employees and aligning it with where they will go with your organization. And of course, a lot of, what we heard previously is really just having that communication, talking to employees and understanding, just opening up that avenue for conversation. And you guys had so many great themes that we actually had to hop onto a second slide to capture everything. So it was so wonderful, but show leaders how training and promotions are valuable and not a burden. So really showing them the value of training and elevating their staff as a positive. And although they take time, it's really best for the organization and for your team. Create an organization that's human-centered, really, we're all people, right? And for small companies, if a leader's great at business, but not great with people, hire somebody who is great with people. So sometimes just because somebody's really skilled and really understands the business doesn't mean that they're going to be a fantastic people leader. So making sure that you have somebody in that people leader role that's really great with your people, your biggest asset. Super important, being able to be your whole self. So having a culture where employees create their own schedules and career goals. So really having the flexibility and the openness to let employees be their true self, have those conversations, and really align with what they want to accomplish both personally and professionally. And then as our fearless leader and visionary always says, if you can't fix it, feature it. Nobody's perfect, and that's okay. And part of the journey is acknowledging that and talking about what we're doing, what we do well, but also acknowledging that we're not perfect and there's things that we can that we have opportunities and we're open to talk about it. So now I'm going to turn it over to our table leaders or note takers. Is there anything in your groups that were discussed that we didn't capture in all of these wonderful themes? No, we were so comprehensive. We got it all.
Those are very thorough notes. I think one thing that came up, and it could probably be dabbled into some of these, but that the clarity and transparency and like really taking the time to have people understand, parts of the business that maybe they weren't aware of before, or to really get them, the vision, the values of a company and the transparency that goes into, here's why we're all here, here's how it's working, here's what we're doing, so that people can really be bought into the bigger picture of it to make, a little bit more, make them feel a little bit more of that value when they are coming to work, that it's not just, checking the box and doing their job, but that there's, a bigger purpose at play.
Wonderful. So true. Anything else?
I would add in, when we come to human-centered, it really comes down to the right person, right seat. And not every leader was placed in their leadership space based on their people skills. It was based on their expertise in their area of specialty. So we've got some great assessments that we can utilize, whether it's our PXT for development, or a Checkpoint 360 that really looks at some of those core leadership competencies and helps level set with that individual. And where is my development needing to focus? I didn't get into this role because I was an excellent human-centered leader. It was because I was an excellent engineer. So taking that time to really invest in developing leaders in a meaningful way where their gaps exist, I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and it's not really a burden or not desired by leaders, right?
Mhm.
Because it's just going to help strengthen what they bring to their positions and help them deal with the scenarios we've been talking about
Right.
today. When they get these disappointed or disengaged employees, and how to coach them along,
Mhm.
and how to find the motivation on that personal level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that, or smaller organizations, especially, there may be some budget constraints. So it's getting creative with where to find, that training and that guidance. And of course, you've got organizations and partnerships with HR Collaborative. We're always happy to help, but look at, you can also look at your EAP or other relationships with vendors or brokers that you have that may have some of that available to you or to your leaders as part of the package that you already have with your partnership. So leverage what you have and reach out to resources that can help connect you. All right. Well, we are winding down on time, and I know we had some great conversations today. But of course, a highlight of our video of today's cafe will be shared on LinkedIn. The big session, not our breakout groups. But we will share that broadly, and it will be shared on LinkedIn as well. Of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our Elevate HR newsletter for event updates, weekly HR insights, keeping in the know on all things related to HR and your business operations. If you have your phone handy, go ahead and pull it out, open up your camera app and snap that QR code. It'll take you right to our newsletter to get you signed up. So our newsletter is fantastic. Oh, thanks, Greg. And if you're on your computer, you can check the chat and click on the link to get signed up for the newsletter. Of course, like we said, we'll be sharing the cafe on LinkedIn. And of course, we have our company page on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with us, please do so. Again, great information is shared there as well. So just like the newsletter, go ahead. If you have your phone handy and you're not connected with us on LinkedIn, pull that out, snap that QR code and get connected. Last, but definitely not least, we would love to talk with you one-on-one. Of course, today's conversation was fantastic, and we loved having you all here. But if you're interested in a more personal conversation and want to talk to one of our people strategists one-on-one, feel free. Please book a free strategy session with one of our solution providers. We talked about a lot of issues challenges we're experiencing in the workplace. And some recommendations in ways we can solve that. And we'd love to be a partner, even if it's just to brainstorm and strategize with you. So please, we can help provide tailored support to what your organization needs. Of course, we provide strategic HR expertise, all things related to compliance, just giving you a fresh perspective. And of course, we have right size pricing, and there's no commitment with these conversations. We just love getting to know the organizations that are out there and the people that are doing the great work that we love doing ourselves.